Good morning, everybody. It's not really a good morning. Hard to have a good morning after what happened yesterday, but it's a morning, and it's one we got to get through. They call it the 48-hour rule when it comes to football. You dwell on a loss for 48 hours, and then you got to flush it. You move on to the next game, to the next one, and I think that's a pretty good rule to have. But guess what? It hasn't been 48 hours, not even close. So we still gotta digest that one for a little while longer, and it's not gonna be fun to digest. But we I think we got to talk about one thing in particular coming out of that game because this is kind of the big thing going on with Seahawks fans right now. They can't stop talking about it, and I I get most of it. Okay, let's talk this through. Let's go through this entire conversation that people have. I see hundreds of comments, Discord stuff, Facebook stuff, X stuff, or Twitter, or whatever it's called. I see it all over the place. I get most of it. Gino Smith has not been playing his best football for a little while now. It's been about a month. And yesterday in particular, he was really bad. He was. That was probably the one game you can point to and say, like, wow, that was just. There was so little good happening in that game when it came to Gino. He had the big play to Metcalf, and honestly, that's probably about it. Like, the big play to JSN was in garbage time. I'm not even going to mention that one. I don't think that one should even count. But other than that, there was just nothing going on in that game. There were some, I mean, these other games, these previous games, he made a couple mistakes, but on the whole, he still did a lot of good things. In this game, you can't even say that. So that happens, and people are starting to lose faith in him, and people are starting to lose trust in him. And that makes sense to me because that's what happens in sports. You don't perform, people lose faith in you, both fans and coaches, I would think, possibly, right? So I see all that, and it makes sense to me. And then I see people talking about replacing Geno Smith as the starting quarterback in Seattle. And when that comes up, people start talking about guys like Quinn Ewers, Cam Ward, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Riley Leonard, Joe Milton. And that makes sense to me too, because this is a really good quarterback class coming up. Whatever you think of Geno, he's getting older. And it makes sense that the Seahawks would try to get a quarterback in this upcoming draft, no matter what. And chances are they would get a guy who they think would be a future franchise guy. So that makes sense to me too, right? Like that just kind of follows. And then you have the last part of this, which I'm seeing so much of lately, all over the place. And this is the stuff that I don't follow, that I don't know where this comes from. People are talking about this guy, not Cam Ward, not Michael Penix, not Quinn Ewers, not Riley Leonard. They're talking about Drew Lock. And they want to replace Geno Smith right now. Not after this season is over, when it would actually make sense to maybe bring in a new quarterback, maybe install a new offense, get some new players in, build the offense around the new quarterback. No, they want to do it right now. And they're talking about Drew Lock. And this one truly confounds me. Like, there are takes, there are stances within the Seahawks base that I don't agree with, but I can follow it. I can see it through. I can see people saying that Geno Smith isn't good enough to be the guy. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I get it. I can see where it comes from. But then they start talking about Drew Lock and how he needs to start now. And this is just one that I have a really hard time even taking seriously. I saw some people saying, oh, okay, if you're coming at it from an irregular angle, which is, I want the Seahawks to tank, and I want them to play Drew Lock because we'll lose more games, well, I might agree with you, but it's too late to tank. You can't tank. Number one, we already have 5 wins. That's too many wins to tank. So if you're thinking about, hey, we need to go lose a bunch of games so we can get Caleb or Drake May, it's too late. Already have too many, and we still get to play the Cardinals again, so we can tank all we want to. We'll probably still win that game. Boom, there's your 6 wins. That's not getting Drake May. That's not getting Caleb Williams. That's not getting Brock Bowers or whatever prospect you're dreaming of. And then there also is the element of we don't have our second round pick. So even if we could tank, that is a massive tanking asset that you've already given to the Giants for Leonard Williams. So no, there's no tanking. That's just fantasy. That's just fan fiction. I saw a couple comments saying we need to play Drew Lock to see what we have. And again, it's too late for that. This team is off to too good of a start. We are 5-3. We are a tiebreaker behind in the NFC West. So it's too late to say, this season's a lost cause. Let's just see what we have with the backup quarterback because this isn't working. It's working way too well to have that conversation. But really, let's talk about Drew Lock for a few minutes. Okay? So Drew Lock came out in the draft in 2019 and was a second round pick, middle second round pick. He was basically the top QB of the tier 3 guys, right? Because Kyler Murray was tier 1 for that draft. He was a weak tier 1, but he was tier 1 in that draft. He was clearly QB1. Then you had Daniel Jones and rest in peace Dwayne Haskins. They were like tier 2 guys. You weren't so sure, but they had franchise potential. And then Drew Lock was like the tier 3 guy. He came in the second round. Those first 3 guys, by the way, that's a really weak top 3 in a draft. Like, the very next year, it was what? Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Tua. Like, that was a pretty bad QB class anyway. And Drew Lock was QB4 in it. So, just so we understand here, Drew Lock was not some Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck or even a Joe Burrow coming out of college. And he didn't fail in Denver despite all odds. And you're not, this isn't some kind of massive reclamation project where if it works out, you're getting like, it's like Steve Young with the Niners, right? Like Steve Young, super talented quarterback, goes to Tampa Bay first overall, completely fails, sits in San Fran for a couple years, takes over, and becomes the hyper elite quarterback that he was always meant to be because he gets the right support and coaching. That's not Drew Lock. Drew Lock, even on his best day, even at his best, is a decent quarterback, a passable starting quarterback, workable. So this Drew Lock thing, this is not like high risk, high reward, okay? The reward is actually kind of low. Drew Lock, in the best case scenario, is probably not as good as Gino Smith was last year, and maybe a tiny bit better than Gino Smith is so far this year. Really. I really mean that. There's nothing here that indicates to me that Drew Lock has some upper level Trevor Lawrence type potential, or even Justin Herbert. He's got a big arm, got a little bit of mobility, and he's improved his footwork since he got to Seattle, but he doesn't make great decisions. His accuracy is kind of whatever. There are good things and bad things about him as a prospect. And the thing is, when it comes to Drew Lock, we don't even need to talk about him as a prospect because we have evidence of what he is. It's not empirical evidence, but he got to play quite a bit in Denver the 3 years he was there. And the rookie year, that 5-game stretch his rookie year, was pretty good. The rest of it was just plain bad. And there are extenuating circumstances. Maybe Vic Fangio didn't like him. He wasn't in a great system. The offense had a lot of issues beyond Drew Lock. I understand all that. But he wasn't accurate. His decision-making was bad. He led the league in interceptions in 2020, the 1 year he actually got to play most of the games. He led the league in interceptions despite only playing in 13 games, by the way. So that's but for those of you out there who are sick of Gino because of his turnovers, just something to think about if you're thinking about, oh, we're going to fix the turnover issue by playing Lock over Gino. Like, Drew Lock, even at his best, is a guy who's going to take chances and turn the ball over a lot, which is a big part of the reason why he didn't win the starting job here in Seattle. You know, Pete Carroll hates turnovers. Like, he hates them more than we do. As much as we may not like turnovers, Pete probably hates them more. Drew Lock is going to turn the ball over. Even at his best, he'll be in contention for leading the league in picks. He will be. So we have the best case scenario, and we have the worst case scenario because the quarterback that he was in 2020 was a bad quarterback. He was not maybe the worst quarterback in the league. He wasn't awful, but he was pretty close to awful. And you balance all this out, all the evidence that we have indicates that benching Gino Smith because you don't like the way he's playing for Drew Lock is a low reward, high risk move. There is a high possibility that Drew Lock goes in there and just isn't good. He's just bad. He's significantly worse than Gino right now. And then the best case scenario is that he becomes the quarterback that he was meant to be coming out of college, which is maybe a little bit better than current Gino and not as good as Gino was last year. So where's the reward here? Where's the reward to be worth the risk? I mean, look, I appreciate Drew Lock, but when he got here in that trade, there's a reason why Denver thought nothing of throwing him into the Russell Wilson trade. Him becoming a viable NFL quarterback is a long shot. It was a long shot 2 years ago. It's a long shot now. It's not bad to have him around as a backup quarterback because he has an NFL arm. He's serviceable. He can run your offense to a certain extent. He has improved in some areas. But overall, there's no reason to believe he's radically different than the quarterback we saw in Denver for 3 years. So I'm just trying to figure this one out. This one really confuses me. And I think I know what it is. I think I understand it, but we need to try to be a little more rational in bumpy times like this. Drew Lock just represents not Gino Smith. That's really the only way I can put this. Drew Lock just represents someone who is not Gino Smith, and some people have it in their heads that Gino Smith is so bad you cannot do worse. I got bad news for those people. I see worse constantly when I look around the league right now. I see quarterbacks who are kind of just muddling around at about the same level as Gino Smith everywhere I look. So, this idea that we have nothing to lose when we're 5-3, we have a wild card spot as of right now, and we're tied, we're a tiebreaker behind the division lead, is simply not true. We have, I think, the 16th or 17th scoring offense in the league right now, even after yesterday's debacle. So it's an average scoring offense. We have a quarterback that I think is right around the middle of the league in interceptions. I know there are at least 10 quarterbacks in the NFL right now with more interceptions. And if Zach Wilson throws a couple tonight, you can throw him in that group as well. So there are again, Geno Smith is not even top 10 in interceptions thrown this year, I don't think. So I assure you, it can get worse. And you can't throw away this season. It's one thing to throw away a season if we were terrible, if we had 1 win or 2 wins right now, and you were just like, okay, put Locke out there so he loses a bunch of games and we can get the top pick. Okay. That, I can at least get on board with that. I don't think this team would do it, but they would at least consider it. But to say we should throw away a season at 5-3 because it suddenly looks like this team isn't a Super Bowl contender, that's not going to happen. That's not good business. That would be malpractice. However you personally may feel about it, you might personally want the Seahawks to throw away a season so they can get rid of this and get rid of that. But that's what putting in Drew Lock would be akin to. And this team is, as of right now, a playoff team. This team has impressive wins this year. They beat Detroit in Detroit. They beat Cleveland. In Cleveland, they've shown they're a pretty good team. They're a flawed team. They're a good team. So none of that's going to happen. And there's just so much going on right now within this fan base that I just don't get. I understand talking about life after Gino after this season is over, or the next season, or life after Waldron after this season, or whatever. I understand, like, there's a ton of stuff that can be done in the offseason, but right now, the die is cast. We have who we have, and those guys just need to play better. See you guys later. Go Hawks.